The grand ballroom of the London hotel buzzed with anticipation as journalists from around the world gathered for what was supposed to be a routine charity event. Prince Harry, dressed in his navy blue suit, stood at the podium with an expression that seemed different from his usual composed demeanor. The charity gala for mental health awareness had drawn the usual crowd of celebrities, dignitaries, and media personnel, but nobody expected what was about to unfold. As Harry began his speech, something shifted in his voice. What started as prepared remarks about mental health initiatives slowly transformed into something much more personal. His hands gripped the podium slightly tighter, and his eyes seemed to search the audience as if looking for understanding rather than approval. Mental health, he began, is something that affects us all, regardless of our background or position in life. The audience nodded politely, expecting the standard royal speech format. But then Harry paused, took a deep breath, and his next words would send shockwaves around the globe. I want to share something with you tonight that I've never spoken about publicly before, he continued, his voice carrying a weight that made every person in the room lean forward. About my wife, Meghan, and the struggles we've faced together that the world has never truly understood. The room fell silent. Cameras that had been casually recording suddenly focused with laser precision. Social media managers in the audience began typing furiously on their phones, sensing that history was being made in real time. Harry's revelation wasn't just about their well-documented exit from royal duties or their move to California. It was something deeper, more profound, and completely unexpected. He spoke about moments of profound doubt, nights when Meghan would sit by their window in Frogmore Cottage, tears streaming down her face, questioning whether their love was worth the constant scrutiny and criticism. There were times, Harry admitted, his voice breaking slightly, when I watched the strongest woman I know crumble under pressure that no human being should have to endure. And I felt helpless, completely and utterly helpless. The audience was transfixed. This wasn't the polished, media-trained prince they were accustomed to seeing. This was a husband, raw and vulnerable, sharing his deepest fears and admissions about his marriage. He described a particular evening in 2019, just months after their wedding, when Meghan had received hundreds of hateful messages on social media within a single hour. Harry found her in their bedroom, phone in hand, reading each cruel comment with tears in her eyes. She looked at me, Harry recalled, and asked if marrying me was the biggest mistake of her life. The revelation hit the room like a thunderbolt. Here was Prince Harry, admitting that his beloved wife had questioned their entire relationship because of the intense pressure and hatred she faced from certain sections of the public and media. But Harry's story took an even more surprising turn. He revealed that it was Meghan who ultimately gave him the strength to make the difficult decisions that followed. She never asked me to choose between her and my family, he explained. But she did ask me to choose between staying silent and protecting our future children from the same treatment she was receiving. The prince went on to describe how Meghan's background as an actress and activist had actually prepared her for public scrutiny, but nothing had prepared either of them for the level of vitriol and racism she would face. She's American, Harry said with a slight smile. She believed that merit and character mattered more than birthright or tradition. That belief challenged everything about the world I was born into. As Harry continued speaking, it became clear that this wasn't just a speech about mental health or even about his marriage. This was a man finally telling his truth, unfiltered and unscripted, about the woman who had changed his life in ways the public had never understood. The most stunning revelation came when Harry admitted that leaving royal duties wasn't just about media intrusion or lack of support from the institution. Meghan showed me, he said, that there was an entire world beyond palace walls where we could use our voices and platforms to create real change, not just cut ribbons and shake hands. He described how Meghan would spend hours researching social causes, reaching out to grassroots organizations, and developing strategies for meaningful impact. While others saw her as an outsider trying to change our traditions, Harry explained, I saw her as someone who could help us evolve and stay relevant in a changing world. The room was completely silent except for the clicking of camera shutters and the soft hum of recording equipment. Harry's honesty was creating a moment that would be dissected and discussed for years to come. As the first part of his unexpected revelation came to a close, Harry looked directly into the cameras. "What I want people to understand," he said, "is that every decision we've made, every step we've taken has been about protecting what matters most to us, our family, our values, and our ability to serve others in our own way." The prince's words hung in the air as he stepped away from the podium, leaving the audience in stunned silence. What had started as a routine charity event had become a defining moment, not just for Harry and Meghan but for the entire conversation about modern royalty, mental health, and the price of public service. As guests slowly began to process what they had just witnessed, one thing was certain: Prince Harry's unexpected openness about his wife and their journey together had just changed everything. The world would never look at their story the same way again, and this was only the beginning of revelations that would continue to unfold in the days to come. Within hours of Prince Harry's unexpected revelations at the London Charity Gala, the story had exploded across every major news network worldwide. Social media platforms crashed temporarily under the weight of millions of users sharing, commenting, and debating the prince's candid admissions about his wife Meghan Markle. But what the world didn't know was that Harry's decision to speak so openly wasn't spontaneous. It was the result of months of careful consideration and a promise he had made to Meghan. During one of the darkest periods of their lives together, the promise had been made on a quiet Sunday morning in their Montecchio home almost 2 years earlier. Meghan had been reading the latest round of negative press coverage while Harry prepared breakfast for their children. The articles weren't just critical, they were cruel, twisting innocent moments into malicious narratives and questioning her every move as a mother and wife. "I can't keep living like this," Meghan had said quietly, not looking up from her tablet. "Always defending myself, always explaining, always trying to prove that I'm worthy of basic human decency." Harry remembered the defeat in her voice. So different from the confident, determined woman who had walked into his life and changed everything that morning. Harry had made a vow that would eventually lead to his public confession. One day, he had told her, "I'm going to tell the world exactly who you are. Not who they think you are, not who the headlines say you are, but who I know you to be. And I won't hide behind royal protocol or diplomatic language. I'll tell them the truth." Now, as international news crews gathered outside Buckingham Palace and royal commentators worked around the clock to analyze every word of Harry's speech. The promise was being fulfilled in ways neither of them had anticipated. The reaction from the royal family was swift but carefully measured. Palace sources, speaking on condition of anonymity, expressed concern about Harry's departure from traditional royal communication protocols. But behind closed doors, the response was far more complex and emotional than the public statement suggested. King Charles III was reportedly both proud and worried about his younger son's honesty. According to sources close to the monarch, Charles had spent hours in his private study, reading transcripts of Harry's speech and grappling with the implications of his son's revelations. The king understood Harry's need to defend his wife, but he also worried about the impact on the monarchy's carefully maintained image of unity and discretion. Prince William's reaction was perhaps the most complicated of all. Friends close to the heir to the throne revealed that William had watched Harry's speech live on television from his home at Adelaide Cottage. The future king reportedly sat in stunned silence as his brother spoke with such raw emotion about Meghan and their struggles. William's relationship with Harry had been strained since their departure from royal duties. But hearing his brother's pain so publicly exposed brought back memories of their shared childhood trauma and their mother's own battles with media scrutiny. "William sees too much of their mother in Harry's words," a close friend explained. "He knows what it feels like to watch someone you love suffer under that kind of pressure." Meanwhile, in California, Meghan herself was experiencing a flood of emotions as she watched her husband's speech from their home office. She hadn't known exactly what Harry planned to say, only that he intended to speak more personally about their journey than ever before. As she listened to him describe their most private moments of doubt and struggle, tears streamed down her face, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of relief. For years, Meghan had felt silenced by royal protocol and media manipulation. She had watched false narratives about her character and motivations spread unchecked, while being advised to rise above it and maintain dignified silence. Harry's willingness to speak their truth publicly was a gift she had never expected and never asked for, but desperately needed. The global response to Harry's revelations was immediate and polarizing. Supporters praised his courage and honesty, calling his defense of his wife both romantic and necessary. Critics accused him of betraying his family and using personal struggles for publicity. Social media hashtags supporting both sides of the debate trended worldwide for days, but perhaps the most significant reaction came from an unexpected source. Other public figures who had faced similar scrutiny began sharing their own stories of struggle with media pressure and public judgment. Celebrities, politicians, and activists from around the world posted messages of support, describing their own experiences with invasive coverage and online harassment. The conversation Harry had started was expanding beyond just his and Meghan's story. It was becoming a broader discussion about the human cost of fame, the responsibility of media outlets, and the impact of social media harassment on mental health. Universities began organizing symposiums on the topic, and mental health organizations reported increased calls to their support lines. In the days following the speech, Harry received thousands of letters and messages from people sharing their own stories of standing up for loved ones or struggling with public criticism. Many came from ordinary people who had faced workplace bullying, social media harassment, or family rejection for their choices in partners or careers. One letter that particularly moved Harry came from a young man in Australia who wrote about defending his immigrant wife against community prejudice. "Your words gave me permission to speak up," the man wrote. "If a prince can risk everything to protect his wife's dignity, then I can certainly find the courage to stand up to the narrow-minded people in my small town." These responses reinforced Harry's belief that his decision to speak so openly had been the right one, regardless of the consequences for his relationship with his birth family or his public image. The prince began to understand that his story wasn't just about royal protocol or celebrity culture. It was about the universal experience of love, protection, and the courage required to defend what matters most. As the second wave of media coverage began to focus on the broader implications of Harry's words, one thing became clear: this was far from over. The prince's unexpected honesty had opened a door that couldn't be easily closed, and the world was eager to hear what other truths might emerge from behind palace walls. 3 days after Prince Harry's explosive revelations about Meghan, an even more stunning development emerged that would shake the foundations of everything the public thought they knew about the couple's departure from royal life. A former palace insider, emboldened by Harry's honesty, came forward with documents and recordings that painted a dramatically different picture of the events leading up to their exit from royal duties. Sarah Matthews, a former communications assistant who had worked closely with both Harry and Meghan during their final year as working royals, requested a private meeting with the prince. What she revealed during that emotional 3-hour conversation would lead to Harry's decision to share even more deeply personal details about their struggle within the royal system. Sarah had kept silent for over 3 years, bound by non-disclosure agreements and loyalty to the institution. But Harry's courage in speaking his truth had inspired her to come forward with evidence that would completely change the narrative surrounding Meghan's treatment. Within the royal household, the documents Sarah provided included internal emails, meeting minutes, and recorded conversations that revealed a systematic campaign to undermine Meghan's reputation from within the palace walls. The evidence showed that negative stories about Meghan hadn't just been the result of media speculation or public criticism. They had been deliberately leaked and sometimes fabricated by people within the royal communications team. One particularly damaging email chain revealed how palace staff had fed information to tabloid journalists about Meghan's supposed difficult behavior, including exaggerated accounts of staff turnover and fabricated stories about her demands on household staff. The email showed a coordinated effort to paint Meghan as demanding, ungrateful, and culturally insensitive, perhaps. Most shocking of all was a recording Sarah had made of a meeting where senior courtiers discussed strategies for managing the Meghan problem before her wedding too. Harry, the recording captured voices discussing how to make her understand her place and expressing concerns about her American independence and activist background influencing Harry's role within the family. Armed with this new evidence, Harry made another unprecedented decision. He would hold a second press conference, this time with documentation to support his earlier claims about the treatment his wife had endured. The announcement sent shockwaves through the British establishment and created panic within Buckingham Palace. The press conference was held at a neutral location, the offices of a prominent human rights organization in London. Harry arrived looking determined but tired, carrying a folder of documents that would expose years of calculated cruelty toward his wife. Last week, I spoke from my heart about my wife's strength and the challenges we faced together, Harry began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. Today I'm going to show you proof of something I hoped I would never have to reveal, evidence of a deliberate campaign to destroy my wife's reputation and push us out of our roles within the royal family. The room was packed with international journalists, legal experts, and human rights advocates. Unlike the charity gala where Harry's revelations had been spontaneous, this was a carefully planned presentation that would methodically dismantle years of public misconceptions about Meghan's time as a working royal. Harry began by reading excerpts from the leaked emails, his voice growing stronger with each revelation. The most damaging evidence came from communications showing how palace staff had actively worked against Meghan's charitable initiatives, blocking her requests for meetings with grassroots organizations, and redirecting her to more traditional royal patronages that would limit her impact. One email particularly captured the institutional resistance Meghan faced. A senior courtier had written to colleagues, "We must remember that the American actress is not here to revolutionize our methods. She must be guided toward appropriate royal behavior and away from her Hollywood activism instincts." The casual dismissal of Meghan as the American actress rather than as the Duchess of Sussex or even by her name revealed the deep-seated prejudice she had faced from the very beginning of her royal life. Harry's voice broke slightly as he read these words aloud. The pain of witnessing his wife's dehumanization clearly still raw, but the evidence went beyond just professional sabotage. Harry revealed text messages and recorded conversations that showed how palace staff had deliberately isolated Meghan from other family members, providing misleading information about scheduling conflicts and creating artificial barriers to her building relationships within the royal family. One particularly cruel example involved Meghan's attempts to coordinate a joint charity project with Catherine, the Princess of Wales. The documents showed how staff had told each woman that the other was too busy or not interested in collaboration, when in reality both had expressed enthusiasm for working together. This deliberate interference had contributed to media narratives about tension between the two women. Harry's most emotional moment came when he shared evidence about the impact this treatment had on Meghan's mental health. Medical records, which Meghan had given permission to share, showed her visits to palace doctors for stress-related symptoms and requests for mental health support that were either delayed or denied entirely. "My wife asked for help," Harry said, his voice breaking. "She followed every proper channel, made every reasonable request, and was met with bureaucracy, delay, and ultimately abandonment. When I tried to advocate for her, I was told I was being overly protective and needed to let her find her own way." The prince revealed that Meghan's famous interview comments about not receiving support weren't exaggerated or dramatic. They were literal descriptions of a system that had failed her when she needed it most. The palace's public response to that interview, calling her recollections disputed, was shown to be a deliberate misrepresentation of documented facts. As Harry continued presenting evidence, a picture emerged of an institution so committed to maintaining traditional hierarchies and controlling narrative that it was willing to sacrifice the mental health and dignity of a family member. The evidence showed that concerns about Meghan's race and nationality had played a role in how she was treated, with internal communications referring to her different background and foreign perspective as challenges to be managed rather than assets to be celebrated. The international reaction to Harry's evidence-based presentation was swift and damning. Human rights organizations called for investigations into institutional discrimination within the British monarchy. Media outlets that had perpetuated negative narratives about Meghan found themselves facing questions about their sources and their responsibility in amplifying leaked misinformation, perhaps. Most significantly, Harry's documentation sparked a broader conversation about institutional power structures and the treatment of women, particularly women of color, within traditional British establishments. Universities, corporations, and government agencies found themselves examining their own practices in light of the systematic discrimination Harry had exposed. As the press conference concluded, Harry made one final statement that would resonate around the world. "I shared this evidence not for revenge, but for truth. My wife deserves to have her story told accurately, and every person deserves to be judged on their actions rather than their background or the prejudices of others." The room erupted in questions, but Harry had said what he came to say. He left the podium knowing that he had crossed a line from which there could be no return, but also knowing that he had finally given Meghan the justice and vindication she had always deserved. The aftermath of Prince Harry's evidence-filled press conference created a crisis within the British monarchy unlike anything seen in modern history. Within 48 hours, Buckingham Palace found itself facing calls for parliamentary inquiry, international diplomatic pressure, and a public relations catastrophe that threatened to overshadow decades of carefully managed royal image building. But perhaps the most unexpected consequence was what happened within the royal family itself. The documented evidence of institutional discrimination and deliberate sabotage had forced family members to confront uncomfortable truths about their own roles in Meghan's treatment and Harry's eventual departure. Princess Anne was the first senior royal to break ranks. Known for her direct communication style and practical approach to royal duties, the Princess Royal requested a private meeting with King Charles III just hours after Harry's press conference ended. Sources close to the royal household revealed that Anne had been deeply disturbed by the evidence, particularly the recordings that showed how Meghan's attempts to modernize certain charitable approaches had been systematically blocked. Anne has always valued hard work and genuine service above protocol, a family friend explained. When she saw evidence that someone was being punished for trying to make their charitable work more effective, it went against everything she believes about what royal service should accomplish. The Princess Royal's intervention proved crucial in shifting the family's response from defensive damage control to genuine soul-searching. Anne reportedly told her brother that the monarchy's survival depended on their ability to acknowledge mistakes and demonstrate real change, rather than simply waiting for the crisis to pass. King Charles, meanwhile, was grappling with the personal pain of watching his family tear itself apart in public, while also recognizing the institutional reforms that Harry's revelations had made unavoidable. Palace sources revealed that the king had spent sleepless nights reviewing the evidence Harry had presented, trying to reconcile the son he knew with the systematic failures the documents revealed. The turning point came when Charles received an unexpected phone call from an unlikely source, Meghan herself. The conversation, which lasted nearly 2 hours, was the first direct communication between them since Harry's original departure from royal duties. What they discussed remained private, but the impact was immediate and profound. Following that conversation, King Charles made a decision that stunned his advisors and transformed the entire crisis. He would personally fly to California to meet with Harry and Meghan face to face, bringing with him senior palace officials who would formally apologize for the treatment Meghan had endured and present a comprehensive plan for institutional reform. The announcement of the king's unprecedented visit to his son and daughter-in-law sent shockwaves through the British establishment and media. No reigning British monarch had ever made such a personal gesture of reconciliation, particularly one that implicitly acknowledged systematic failures within the royal household. Harry's reaction to his father's planned visit was complex and emotional. In a brief statement released through his spokesman, he said, "I appreciate my father's willingness to have difficult conversations and his commitment to learning from the mistakes that drove us apart. This is about more than our family. It's about the values and principles that should guide any institution that serves the public." Meanwhile, Meghan's response to the developments revealed the depth of trauma she had experienced and the long road to healing that lay ahead. In her first public statement since Harry's revelations, she wrote, "Truth has a power that can't be silenced forever. I'm grateful that the world now understands what we lived through, but more importantly, I'm hopeful that sharing our experience might prevent others from enduring similar treatment." The international implications of the royal family crisis extended far beyond British shores. Commonwealth nations, many with their own complex relationships with the monarchy's colonial history, found themselves reconsidering their ties to the institution. Several Caribbean nations that had been moving toward republic status accelerated their timelines, citing the discrimination revealed in Harry's evidence as incompatible with their values of equality and justice. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, speaking at a press conference in Ottawa, reflected the complicated position many Commonwealth leaders found themselves in. The revelations from Prince Harry have forced all of us to examine how institutions we respect can sometimes fall short of the values they claim to represent. This is an opportunity for growth and positive change. Back in Britain, the political ramifications were equally significant. Opposition leaders called for parliamentary oversight of royal household employment practices, while constitutional experts debated whether the monarchy's traditional immunity from discrimination laws should continue in the modern era. Perhaps most importantly, Harry's documentation had sparked a grassroots movement among current and former palace employees. Encouraged by Sarah Matthews' courage in coming forward, dozens of other staff members began sharing their own experiences of discrimination and institutional pressure. Within the royal household, these additional testimonies painted a picture of an organization where hierarchy and tradition often trumped basic human decency, and where staff members who raised concerns about unfair treatment faced career consequences. The mounting evidence suggested that Meghan's experience, while extreme, was part of a larger pattern of institutional problems. One particularly powerful testimony came from Maria Rodriguez, a former press secretary who had worked for several royal households over a 15-year career. She revealed how she had been repeatedly passed over for promotions despite excellent performance reviews, and how her suggestions for more inclusive communication strategies had been dismissed as too political or not traditionally royal. Maria's account resonated with many people of color working in traditional British institutions who had faced similar challenges. Her decision to speak publicly, inspired by Harry's courage, helped transform the conversation from being specifically about Meghan's treatment to being about systematic discrimination within elite British establishments. The cumulative effect of these revelations was a fundamental shift in how the public viewed both the royal family and the broader question of institutional accountability. Opinion polls showed that while support for the monarchy remained strong, there was overwhelming public demand for transparency and reform in how royal households operated. Youth organizations, human rights groups, and professional associations began organizing conferences and workshops on institutional discrimination, using the royal crisis as a case study for broader conversations about power, prejudice, and the responsibility of established institutions to evolve with changing social values. As King Charles prepared for his historic trip to California, the entire world watched to see whether this unprecedented crisis would lead to genuine transformation or merely cosmetic changes designed to weather the storm. The stakes couldn't have been higher, not just for the royal family, but for the future of one of the world's oldest and most visible institutions. King Charles III's arrival in California marked a historic moment that transcended royal protocol and family dynamics to become a watershed event in modern institutional accountability. The king's decision to meet with Harry and Meghan on their own territory, away from the formal constraints of palace life, signaled a level of humility and genuine commitment to reconciliation that few had expected from the monarchy. The private jet carrying the king landed at a small airfield in Santa Barbara on a crisp morning in late autumn. Unlike typical royal visits with their elaborate security protocols and media fanfare, this arrival was deliberately low-key. Charles had specifically requested that the meeting be as private as possible, understanding that genuine reconciliation required honest conversation rather than public theater. Harry and Meghan drove themselves to meet the king, a simple gesture that carried profound symbolic weight. For the first time since their departure from royal duties, they were meeting as family members rather than as representatives of competing institutions. The 3-day visit that followed would prove to be transformative. For everyone involved, the first day was perhaps the most emotionally challenging. Charles, Harry, and Meghan spent hours in the garden of the Sussex home, with no staff present except for essential security. The king listened as his son and daughter-in-law walked him through the documented evidence of discrimination and institutional failure that had driven their departure, but this wasn't just a replay of Harry's public revelations. In the privacy of their garden, Meghan shared details about her experience that she had never spoken about publicly: the isolation, the constant second-guessing of her every action, and the gradual erosion of her sense of self-worth. Under the pressure of institutional disapproval, Charles was particularly moved when Meghan showed him letters she had written but never sent messages to palace staff pleading for understanding, requests for guidance on navigating royal protocol, and heartbreaking notes questioning whether she was somehow fundamentally unsuited for royal life, despite her genuine desire to serve. "I wanted to succeed so badly," Meghan told the king, her voice steady but filled with remembered pain. "I studied every rule, every tradition, every expectation, but it felt like no matter what I did, someone would find fault with my approach or my background or my very presence." The king's response surprised both Harry and Meghan. Rather than offering explanations or justifications for the institutional failures they had documented, Charles simply said, "I'm sorry. I failed you both as a father and as the head of the institution that hurt you. That's not who we should be, and it's not who we will continue to be." The second day of the visit focused on the future rather than the past. Charles had brought with him detailed proposals for institutional reform that went far beyond cosmetic changes to address the systematic problems Harry's evidence had revealed. The reforms included independent oversight of royal household employment practices, mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all staff, and transparent processes for addressing discrimination complaints, but the most significant discussion centered on Harry and Meghan's potential role in these reforms. The king asked them to consider returning to Britain not as traditional working royals, but as leaders of a new initiative focused on modernizing the monarchy's approach to service and public engagement. The proposal was complex and unprecedented. Harry and Meghan would maintain their independence and their California home while also establishing a presence in Britain focused specifically on charitable work that aligned with their values. They would have the freedom to pursue causes like racial justice, mental health advocacy, and environmental protection without the traditional constraints of royal protocol. Most importantly, they would be given a platform to help reform the very institution that had failed them. Their experience with discrimination and institutional pressure would become assets in helping the monarchy evolve rather than barriers to their participation in royal life. Meghan's reaction to the proposal was thoughtful and measured. She had always believed in the potential for positive change within established institutions, but she also understood the enormous challenges involved in transforming deeply rooted organizational cultures. Change has to be real, she told Charles. It can't just be about better public relations or more carefully worded statements. It has to be about fundamentally different values and practices. The king assured her that the reforms he was proposing weren't cosmetic. He had already begun restructuring palace leadership, bringing in external consultants with expertise in organizational change and institutional bias. Several senior staff members who had been implicated in the discriminatory treatment documented by Harry had been asked to resign. The third day of the visit included an unexpected element: video calls with other members of the royal family who wanted to participate in the reconciliation process. Princess Anne joined from Scotland, offering her characteristically direct support for the reform initiative. Prince William participated from Wales, expressing his own commitment to ensuring that future royal spouses would never face the treatment Meghan had endured. Perhaps most surprisingly, Princess Catherine requested a private conversation with Meghan during which she apologized for not doing more to support her sister-in-law during her difficult period as a working royal. Catherine revealed that she had been advised by palace staff that Meghan preferred to handle things independently, advice that Catherine now realized had been deliberately misleading. "I should have trusted my instincts and reached out directly," Catherine told Meghan. "I knew you were struggling, and I let protocol and staff advice prevent me from being the family member you needed." The conversations between the two women were emotional and healing, addressing years of misunderstanding and missed opportunities for connection. They discovered that many of the supposed conflicts between them had been manufactured or exaggerated by staff members and media narratives, rather than reflecting genuine disagreements. As the king's visit concluded, Harry and Meghan asked for time to consider the proposals they had received. The offer to return to Britain as reform leaders was appealing, but they wanted to ensure that any decision they made would genuinely serve their values rather than simply providing the royal family with positive publicity. The visit ended with a private family dinner at which no staff or security personnel were present except in remote locations. For the first time in years, Charles, Harry, and Meghan were able to simply be family members sharing a meal and conversation, without the weight of institutional expectations or media scrutiny. The king's parting words to his son and daughter-in-law captured the significance of what had transpired over the 3 days. "You forced us to confront truths we had been avoiding," he told them. "That took courage, and it came at great personal cost to both of you. Now we have the opportunity to build something better together." As news of the king's visit became public, the world watched with fascination and hope. The unprecedented nature of a reigning monarch traveling to apologize to family members and propose institutional reforms captured global attention and sparked conversations about accountability and change within traditional power structures worldwide. The royal family's crisis had become an opportunity for transformation. But the success of that transformation would depend on whether the promises made in California could be translated into real change in the palaces and institutions of Britain. 6 months after King Charles's historic visit to California, the world witnessed an extraordinary transformation that few could have predicted when Prince Harry first stepped up to that charity gala podium. The Sussex family's return to British soil wasn't just a personal reconciliation. It represented a fundamental shift in how one of the world's oldest institutions approached change, accountability, and service in the modern era. The announcement of Harry and Meghan's decision to accept the King's reform proposal came through a joint statement that was released simultaneously from Buckingham Palace and the Sussex Foundation. The carefully worded declaration emphasized that their return was conditional on continued progress in institutional reform and that they would maintain their independence while working within the royal framework. We believe that meaningful change is possible when institutions are willing to confront their failures honestly and commit to doing better, the statement read. Our experiences, while painful, have given us unique insight into how traditional structures can evolve to better serve everyone. The couple's new role was unlike anything in royal history. They would lead the Crown Initiative for Institutional Excellence, an independent body with the authority to investigate discrimination complaints, recommend policy changes, and monitor the implementation of reforms across all royal households. Their headquarters would be established at Frogmore House, symbolically returning to the place where their royal journey had begun. The first major test of the new arrangement came when Harry and Meghan returned to London for the announcement ceremony. The media attention was intense, but noticeably different from their previous experiences. New protocols had been established requiring journalists to submit questions in advance and prohibiting personal attacks or invasive speculation about their private lives. Meghan's appearance at the ceremony was particularly significant. She spoke publicly for the first time about her decision to engage with the institution that had caused her such pain. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, she said. It means taking the lessons from difficult experiences and using them to create better outcomes for others. Her speech included a powerful acknowledgement of the people who had supported them throughout their struggle. She specifically thanked Sarah Matthews, the former palace insider whose courage in coming forward with evidence had been crucial in documenting the discrimination they